Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lois Winter. I'm chairman of the York County Historical Committee, and I'm so pleased and honored to be able to have this presentation and to sponsor this and have you here and welcome you today. I thought I would tell you something about the history of Veterans Day, since we're the Historical Committee. In World War I, known at the time as the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice or temporary cessation of hostilities between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And for that reason, November 11th, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. Of course, that didn't exactly happen. And we are definitely noticing that today at 11:11, we rang the bell because this will be the only time for 100 years that we will have 11:11, 11:11:11. So we want to take a special notice of that. But that original Armistice Day was only for World War I. So later on, in 1938, it became a legal holiday officially, but it was still known as Armistice Day. And it wasn't until 1954, when President Dwight Eisenhower issued the first Veterans Day proclamation, which stated, "In order to ensure proper and widespread observance of this anniversary, all veterans organizations, and the entire citizenry wish to join hands in the common purpose." Veterans Day continues to be observed November 11th, regardless of what day of the week it falls. The restoration of the observance of Veterans Day to November 11th preserves the historical significance of the date, but also helps focus attention on the important purpose of Veterans Day, a celebration to honor Americans' veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. I am pleased to present Tim Smith, historian and reenactor, who will present the rest of the program. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Lois. Lois is our chairman and has done a fantastic job chairing the Historical Committee, so she oversees all of the programs to make sure we're on track with what we're doing. What we have been doing the last few years is doing a program about the letters that people write back home from war, and in one case, the first letter, actually one written to a woman's husband during the American Revolution. So I'd like to introduce Mike Steen, who will read our Revolutionary War letter, 1776.
From Abigail Grant to her husband. I hear by Captain William Riley news that makes me very sorry, for he says you proved a grand coward when the fight was at Bunker's Hill. If you are afraid, pray own the truth and come home and take care of our children, and I will be glad to come and take your place. I never will be called a coward. Neither will I throw away one cartridge, but exert myself bravely in so good a cause. Abigail Grant to her husband.
we thought we should, I thought that was an ideal letter to put in, especially a woman brave enough to write during that time period to her husband and tell him, if you're going to be a coward, I'll take your place. At this time, we'd like to welcome VFW Post 824, who will be placing our colors.
Pledge with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Peggy Turnage on our Historical Committee read our Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like now to introduce one of our committee members and also veteran, Robert Myers, who will read the letter from the War of 1812, their second letter.
June 19th, 1813, Fort Stevens. The men is grumbling that they have to work so hard and is not like to get any pay, but for my part, I don't care about the pay. I want to put in my tour of duty and go home to my family. Money is not my object, but to serve my time and come home with honor. Militiaman John Holliday.
And I'd also like to recognize our guests, two of our supervisors, Mr. George Rickshack, thank you for coming, and Ms. Sheila Knoll. We can always count on both of them to be here at Veterans Day Memorial Day. We appreciate what you guys do. You uphold what all these veterans have accomplished. Our next letter, Mike Roll will read. He's doing our American Civil War. It's letter number 3 from the American Civil War from 1861.
June 12, 1861, Camp Pelican, Virginia. Lizzie, I have not been in battle yet, but come very near it day before yesterday at Bethel Church, 16 miles below here. We received orders that morning to make a forced march, that they were fighting and needed our assistance very much. We made it in a little less than 3 hours, which is the best time we ever been made, and we then marched back that night, where we were just 1 hour too late. The battle had closed before we got there. I got to see a good many of the dead Yankees laying on the battlefield, for which we were glad to find, as I ever was, to find a deer which I wounded and came upon. The number of Confederate troops were 1,500, and our enemy were 4,500 strong. The lives of the enemy, from their own statement, is 300 killed and wounded. Our loss is 1 man killed and 4 wounded. If the Yankees can't fight no better than that, they had better quit and go home, which they say they will as soon as their time expires, which will be in a short time, as they only enlisted for 3 months. That fight at Bethel Church was made by North Carolina and Virginia troops. They told me that they called for the Louisiana boys during the whole fight. Private Winter Posey, Company F, 2nd Louisiana Infantry.
Winter Posey was born in Maryland and enlisted in the Louisiana unit, and he dies at Chancellorsville in 1864, at the Wilderness time period, at Chancellorsville in 1863 rather. So he doesn't survive the war, but he left a host of letters. And what's interesting is Camp Pelican is now what we call Patrick Henry Mall. So if you're at Patrick Henry Mall, that was a major camp, and it was Pelican obviously because the Louisiana troops were camped there. I've given out photographs of some of the men that we have on our monument, and I'm going to read the name, and the person that has the corresponding photograph, if you'd hold the photograph up, and I want to talk about what happened to these men. All of the men that photographs that are out with all of you are men that are on our monument. And of course, there wasn't photography in the first part of what we have listed up until the American Civil War. But starting with the American Civil War, photography became available. So we have, from the American Civil War, Elijah Buchanan. Elijah Buchanan, the image is a daguerreotype, and he is killed in action at the Battle of Sharpsburg or Antietam Creek. At that, in a 15-minute period, I think about 17 men from York County are killed, advancing out of the West Woods, and probably, from what we've read in letters, it was probably 1 or 2 volleys that decimated the unit. They were, the particular unit was shot up so badly that they didn't participate at Gettysburg. They were put on provost duty in Petersburg for the extent of the rest of the next year. Got John Ray Forrest, Second World War. John Ray Forrest is in the Marines, enlisted in the Marines actually before the war starts. He's killed on the first day of the Battle of Iwo Jima on the beaches. He's from Poquoson, Virginia, but lived in DAR, Virginia for a short time. So, and his body was returned home. I believe it's back here in Poquoson. We have the Fox brothers, Clyde Thomas Fox and Earl Burcher Fox. Earl Burcher Fox is lost at sea. There's a transport ship ferrying the 66th Division, one of the regiments from the 66th, across the English Channel from England to France. It gets hit by German V-boats and sunk. It's a Belgian troop ship, and the Belgians have not, they ferried so many troops, they stopped telling them where the life jackets and their life rafts were and how to evacuate in case they were sunk. So over 600 men are drowned in the English Channel. It's kept quiet during the rest of the war because they don't want the Germans to realize that they were effectively doing something. But a regiment, half of the regiment was decimated in one instance. Earl Burcher Fox's body was recovered. It's one of 7 Virginians, the only Virginian recovered on that ship, and he's buried in Normandy at the very famous cemetery that you see in a lot of the movies, Saving Private Ryan. Charles, would you like to come on up? Charles is appearing historically because the British always complained that the Americans arrived lately in the First World War. So we planned this. And if you notice, Mike's dressed in a federal uniform reading about how they whipped the Yankees. So we have living historians have a lot of tongue-in-cheek things going on because they love history, and it's interesting how many times they'll cross genres or sides just to represent a certain part of history. We have from the down these George Washington Smith, is he out there with anyone? Not sure, he's one of them I gave out. We have Melvin Opheim and Joseph Knofton. Okay, both of the men were from Norwich, Virginia, the northern part of York County. 5 men from Norwich and 1 from James City County in the same general area enlisted in the Marines in the First World War, as opposed to being drafted in the Army. Of the 6 men, only 2 of them returned. The other 4 were all killed in the same action during the Chateau Thierry action. So out of 6 men from one small community of Norwich, 4 were killed in action serving with the Marines. To put it in perspective, there are only 2 Marine regiments that served in France as part of the 2nd Division. Divisions then were 4 regiments strong. The 2nd Division had 2 Marine regiments and 2 Army regiments. So there, in all, there weren't that many Marines over there, but the 4 men were killed in one action. We had losses in the War of 1812. Again, there are no photographs available of them, of 7 York County men that are killed at the Battle of Hampton, 5 with one unit, one company. If you think about that time period, then the troops probably got together, drilled once a month, drank a little whiskey, and went home. And because that's what the militia did, not knowing that they would have to stand up against British regulars. And they tried to make a stand. Of course, the British overran them and burned the city of Hampton. The first time it was burned. It gets burned several times. People just don't like Hampton, I guess. It gets burned by the British, and then gets burned again by the Confederates to keep the Federals from using it. So, but anyway, so that action and the action of Antietam are decimating York County in both instances. We've got Melvin Douglas Rash, Vietnam War. His remains were just returned last year, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery. He was lost over Laos on a bombing mission, and when they were shot down, and it took them that long to recover the remains and identify them. And I would visit the family when we were working on the monument, and they said every year they would get a report from the government on what they were going through to get the remains back. They recovered some of the other remains too, I believe, but of the 10 men that were on the plane. But anyway, he's back home now, and I think it was an article in the paper, a real nice article about it. We've got Gilbert Wayne Page. Gilbert Wayne Page is lost at the Battle of Hamburger Hill. He's from Poquoson, Virginia, during the Vietnam period. His buddy, he enlisted on the buddy program with another man from Poquoson, and when the other man from Poquoson told me when he walked by and saw his knapsack with his name on it and a pile of stuff removed from casualties, he knew he'd lost him. And he's mentioned in a book because he's on a secondary mission at the Hamburger Hill battle where he's being sent up the back of the mountain with a group of people, and they're ambushed. And I visited most of these people's families over the years to learn the stories of them. Mr. Rickshack, who do you have? Robert White is another one of the men that's killed at the Battle of Antietam. He's killed in the same action as Elijah Buchanan. He's 6'1", which is tall for that time period, and he's from Seaford, Virginia. And his image was taken probably in Richmond, first part of the war, when the unit gets sent up there. And on his hat, it says YR for York Rangers, the unit he was in. See which other ones we have out there. Let's raise up. Vernon Dale Huddleston. He gets stationed at Langley Air Force Base, or Langley Airfield during the Second World War. He marries a girl in Dare. And so he's from Chicago, I believe, and he gets shot down over the Pacific. He's serving with a unit called the Red Raiders, and his body's not recovered. But he's on a monument in Hawaii that's dedicated to all the men lost in the Pacific, whose bodies weren't recovered. So, Benny Leverson's from the northern end of the county all the way up near the Pottery. He serves with the 314th Machine Gun Company, and he gets killed in the last major action of the war, the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, in November of 1918. Who else do we have? Ernest Thornton Holloway is a naval midshipman, and he is lost at sea when his ship was sunk in the Pacific. He's also in the same monument to those lost in the Pacific. There's a monument in Hawaii and one, I believe, in New England that all the men whose bodies aren't recovered in the Second World War, their names are on those 2 monuments. Richard Huggett, he's lost doing guard duty on Highway 1 in Vietnam. That photograph was taken when he was at Fort Carson, Colorado. And I talked to one of the fellows that he served with that lives in Northern Virginia, and he confirmed what happened to him. He was motioning a Vietnamese civilian bus over to the side of the road, and the bus pulled over and hit a mine, and the mine shrapnel hit him in the throat. And at that time, Colonel Otis was flying over with a surgeon, so they landed and tried to save him. Colonel Otis lives on a peninsula, so I called him. And, of course, he retired as a general from Fort Monroe, so I called and talked to him. And he said, in the book about this incident, Huggett's name a different name is used, but I figured out who he was. And in talking to General Otis, he said, so you figured out who he was, and he still vividly remembers the incident. And hopefully one day we can get him to come here and speak at one of the ceremonies. But it's interesting to connect the stories and to talk to people who were there and a part of what happened. Marius Napoleon Jones, he's from Lackey, Virginia. He's in the Army at the beginning of the Vietnam War, gets out of the Army, has trouble finding a job, likes the Army, goes back in the Army, and he gets back to Vietnam on his second tour and contracts one of those jungle diseases and dies in Saigon. Jack Sinclair Holloway is serving with the Marines, is lost during the Chosin Reservoir action in 1951 in Korea. And one day when I was photographing pictures, I drove around, spent the day driving around to people's homes, and this fellow's brother brought that by my workplace for me to photograph, and I realized at the end of the day I'd spent the whole day photographing Marines. I think yesterday was a Marine Corps holiday, birthday, but I shot both the Knopfton and the First World War Marines, Second World War Marines, John Ray Forrest, Vietnam-era Marines, and the Korean War-era Marines all on the same day. So just how things work out, I guess. What other photographs we have? It's Alfred Moody Moore. He's a pilot that's lost in the Mediterranean in the Second World War, and his name, he's another one whose body's not recovered, and his name's on the monument up in New England. His cousin, Harold Moore. Same thing, Dr. Moore's family in Poquoson. Harold Moore's lost over the Atlantic. He's also in the Army Air Corps, U.S. Army Air Corps, and his name's on the same monument. Wainwright. Wilton Wainwright is lost on November 10th, next to the last day of the war. He's serving with the 318th Infantry, Company G. At the beginning of the First World War, the first draft takes men from Poquoson, York County, Gloucester, the Guinea section of Gloucester, Hampton, Newport News, and they put them all in the same company. And I'd heard those stories when I was growing up, but I found a roster of them, and they're all the stories were true. So you start hearing the veterans and the people that knew the veterans talk about the incidents with this particular company. One incident with the Company G group is that they go to Camp Lee, and that's where they're trained. And one of the Guineamen at Camp Lee doesn't like anybody ordering them around. And so they come back here, and Sam Freeman from Poquoson and Charles Hogg from Gloucester, from the Guinea section of Gloucester, are on leave prior to them being shipped to France. And they go over to what we know now as a Naval Weapons Station, but then it was a Naval Mining Depot, and being a Navy fortification, it has Marine guards. So the two men are standing at the gate, have a vehicle blocking the gate, and the Marine guard goes over and taps Charles Hogg on the shoulder and says, "You need to move your vehicle. You're blocking the gate." And Charles Hogg says, "I'll get to it in a minute," as the Guineaman would say. So he waits, and the Marine goes back over, he said, "You need to move your vehicle. We can't move things in and out of the gate. You're blocking the gate." He said, "I'll get to it in a minute." So he ignores him, and the Marine goes back over the third time and says, "Sir," you said, "you got to move your vehicle or I'm going to have it towed." He turns around and he said, "Hey," he said, I ain't afraid of you or the whole daggone Marine Corps." At which point, Sam Freeman taps him on the shoulder and he said, and Sam's from Poquoson, he says, "You know," he said, "I'm right behind you, but I think we're biting off a big chew." A lot of stories about those guys. We'll go to Stanley Hornsby over here. Stanley Hornsby's from the Hornsbyville section of York County. At some point after the war, his family moves to Portsmouth, and his dad goes to work in the shipyard. He's serving with the 1st Division, and he's killed in action in the Hurtgen Forest operation. So, yep. This one is Harry Edward Wainwright, and he's named after his uncle who's lost in the First World War in the Navy, dies of the influenza during the epidemic. Harry Moore, I talked to his brother, Harry Wainwright, his brother Benny's still living. He was a tail gunner on B-29s. Harry was on his way back, the war was over. He was in the Burmese theater. They landed in Hawaii to refuel the plane. They reboard the plane and start the last leg of their trip from Hawaii to California, and the pilot realizes the plane wasn't refueled, so the plane goes down in the Pacific Ocean. Some of the men survive. Harry was not one of them, so he survives the war, only die at the end of the war. And I think that's his image in his Boy Scout uniform. Raymond Estelle, his wife came to our Memorial Day service. Raymond was killed April of 2011. If you remember the incident where a Afghan pilot, I believe, Afghan soldier, shoots up a group. You can correct me because you probably may even know more about this, but they're stationed at Langley Air Force Base. He and another man stationed at Langley, several of them are killed in the incident. He was residing in York County at the time. And his wife came, and it's a very fine family, very sad incident that would happen. Who else do we have? We haven't introduced. Okay. Floyd Diego White. Floyd Diego White is from Seaford, Virginia. He gets a Spanish flu and dies in the Spanish flu epidemic, even though he's serving his country. He's in France when he's lost at one of the base hospitals. Any others we haven't held up? Okay, Robert Reed Holloway. He's a mean-looking guy. He's in the Army part of the 2nd Division, the same group that the Marines are in. He's in one of the regiments in the Army section, and Robert Reed Holloway is killed in the same action as the Marines are. They're all in the same battle. Is there any others out there? Anyway, I thought it's nice when you go look at the names on the monument, or if you scroll on the York County website and look at the names, you need to put the faces with them, because that's what's important. That's what we need to remember. And we can't put faces on all of them, but all of them had family, all of them had people that were part of this community, and we need to recognize that. At this point, we'd like to read our next letter, and that's from the First World War. Put that up here. From 1918. So, Corporal Joe Mouse, Company A, 105th Regiment, 27th Division. He's from New York. Dear Madeline, left Spartansburg and arrived in Newport News last night, very much to say our delight, but sorry to think that I will not see you before leaving over there. We have not received any pay as yet. Think we will receive it shortly, and we will get leave without money. Therefore, I'm going to ask for money through a telegram. That means that you're getting the letter after I've already sent the telegram for the money. My letter is going to be different than others, as I think the censor will inspect all letters. But anyway, I'm going to say what I think, even though the censor may camouflage some of the words. So it talks about the censorship, which you didn't have in the first letters of that period. At this point, we're going to ask our living historians to go to the back, and we're prepared to bring our veterans forward, as we've done in the past. If you're a veteran or active duty serving our nation, as the music plays and reenactors pass you, if you'll get up out of your seat and follow our living historians forward so we can bring you up front and recognize all of you. He's predated, however, by Mike Steen, who's our American Revolutionary War veteran. Looking well for that. Our next letter is from the Second World War from 1945, and we'll have Rich Kilblain read that for us.
Okay, March 11, 1945, Guadalcanal. Hiya, Toots. How's the kid sister this nice warm evening? I'm sitting in the guardhouse, corporal of the guard, and the sound of the blue Pacific surf is like music. And the moon, the moon is the brightest. Bluest moon I've ever had the pleasure of setting me optics on. It's nice and cool at night, but the days are sure scorchers. How's the weather at home, kid? How many boyfriends did you say you had? I don't remember from your previous letter what the number was. Now, really, do you have any on the string? You're at 15 now, aren't you? It seems like only a short time ago you were only a homely, skinny brat. The only difference now is you're older and bigger. Now, don't take this serious, okay? Jeff and I are still getting along good and going places together. He's still in the mortars, and I was transferred to a rifle platoon. You may be 5 foot 7 3/4 tall, but you're still a runt to me. Well, I guess it's about time for all tonight, all right? Love, your brother Bus, Corporal Hugh C. Lipsius, Company E, 2nd Battalion, 29th Infantry, 6th Marine Division.
Thank you, Rich. At this point, we've got 2 wreaths we'd like to have placed. Disabled American Veteran Chapter 13 will be placing the first wreath. And these will go out to our monument after the program's over. And our second wreath will be placed by Comte de Grasse chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Miss Kim Claytor is going to place it for us. And now we'd like to have everybody stand. We'll have the color guard back up and we'll play taps. Our next letter is from the Vietnam War, and we've asked our living historian from that period, who we just found out a little while ago is also a VMI graduate, to come up and read that letter.
This letter is dated March 14th, 1968. I'm in the 1st Cav here in Nam. You might have heard about us up at Khe Sanh. We're getting ready for A Shaw Valley, the Valley of No Return, where Special Forces, 101st Airborne, and Marine units have all disappeared. It's believed to be the last stronghold of the NVA, so if our 60-day offensive works, this war should be over by the end of the summer. This country is really something, and it's signed Private Michael G. Lipsius, who happens to be the son of the man who Rich read the letter from. D Troop, 5th Squadron, 7th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division.
The letter he just read was the last letter home. He is killed in action 1 month later after he arrives in Vietnam. At this point, I'd like to ask the color guard to retreat the colors. You can all be seated. Our last letter today is a letter from Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, and it's being read by a veteran of that conflict, Mr. Robert Myers.
February 12, 1991. Last night, I had a duty of bringing a load of ammo to the front line. That was a charge. I drove, and my A driver ran the 50 cal machine gun mounted on top of the truck. We had to go right to the border of Iraq. Mortar rounds were blowing all over us. What a scare. All you can do is just drive and hope you do not get hit. Last night on CNN, they had said that the port of Jubail had been hit by a Scud when they actually missed us. So if you ever hear things like that again, now that you know where I'm at, remember, I may have been somewhere else, or it may have been a bad report. Corporal Darren J. Stevenvold, 6th Motor Transportation Battalion, B Company, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force.
I don't know how tough it was for a fellow in the Air Force to read a Marine's letter. I don't know. He did it for us, but I look, oh, I got a Marine's letter. So, but all that little inter-service rivalry, I think, is all for fun. Right, guys? I'd like to recognize the people that have been up here on the podium with us. Lois Winter, who's our chairman of our committee, and Peggy Turnage, who's been on the committee, part of our committee for a long time. Where's Peggy? Oh, she's downstairs. She's actually doing the refreshments. She led our Pledge of Allegiance. And our reenactors, the people do living history. They do it for the love of history, and it's probably the best way, one of the best ways to teach the different periods of history here. And we have Charles Feldhausen, who's doing our First World War. Charles is also an Army veteran, U.S. Army. We've got Don Calder, and we just met a few minutes ago, just before the service, and he's doing Vietnam period, and he's also a veteran, U.S. Army? Navy. So here we go, another guy that's crossed genres a little bit. So, he said he makes an Army uniform look good. We've got Rich Kilblain. Rich is actually, are you retired now, technically, or active duty?
I'm still working as a civilian with the Army.
Okay. Rich is an Army veteran, and he's still working. He teaches was teaching at Fort Eustis, now at Fort Lee, and teaches one of the schools. So, and he's probably one of the premier living historians I know. He just does a fantastic job, and his knowledge is extreme, and he writes books. He's written a book called The Filthy 13, The True Story of the Dirty Dozen, which is an excellent read. So if you thought it was just a movie with Lee Marvin, there's a lot more to it than that. Thank you, Rich. Mike Rolla has been with us here before, and he's done several periods. He does American Revolution and Civil War. He's a good friend. And Mike is also an Army veteran. And he can wear either uniform. It doesn't seem to scratch too bad, I guess. I've seen Mike Steen. Mike is at the Waterman's Museum in Yorktown, and I think we're very fortunate to have him as part of this community. I've known Mike for a number of years and seen him in a multitude of different living history uniforms. He's also worked at many of the major historical sites in the state, and his knowledge is another one. If you took all the history of this group up here and combine it, you'd have about a set of 21 books. It's just amazing what these guys like. And then Robert Myers, who is also a veteran and on our historical committee, and Robert's read several of our letters, and we're very fortunate to have him also. He's a pilot. So he's one of the guys that wrangles the F-22s around. So, if we ever get to see you fly overhead, but I know you've got them all working anyway. We're fortunate to have Robert as part of our historical committee. We'd also like to thank VFW Post 824, the Comte de Grasse chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, for helping us today. Disabled American Veterans, Chapter 13, for placing the wreath. York County, Randy in the back, who's running our sound and everything, and all the people of York County that have helped put on the ceremony. Our Board of Supervisors, it's always good to see you all out as part of this, and we thank you for what you all do. The members of the Historical Committee that are here, and most of all, we'd like to thank all of our veterans. We thank you, and this is what we try to do something for you all. Thanks for coming out to the ceremony today.